I am Michelle, and welcome to the webinar. Today, we have a pretty packed hour for you. We're going to show you today how to unlock really the potential in your supply chain and operations. Whether you are running a manufacturing company or you're running e-commerce and buying your product, making a physical product, the journey from firefighting and daily work to breakthrough performance, it's a tough one to crack. Yet it's absolutely possible. And industry leaders are doing it every day. So how do you do it at small and medium-sized companies without big teams and big budgets? That's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to show you this. I have seen this method succeed. I believe in it so much. I built a company around it. And I'm excited to show it today to you today so that you can implement it. I wish I had known this when I was in your shoes running daily supply chain operations. So, all right, let's get into it here. Oh, some housekeeping before I forget. Eugenio is our moderator today. He is in the background. He will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So if you have any questions or comments, just pop them in. We do have a couple of times within the webinar that we're going to pause and take questions and have a quick discussion about whatever you guys want to talk about or ask about. So he will be, you can contact him on that for the chat. He'll see your questions. And we are recording. So we will share the recording after the webinar to all the attendees and to the people that signed up and couldn't make it. Okay. Okay. All right. So what is the system that we're going to be talking about today? Let me just show it to you very quickly so you know exactly what we're going to be talking about and you can get a sense of it. There's three parts to the system. You need all three, okay? Within those three steps are, or those three blocks, let's say, are 8 steps, right? And within each of those 8 steps are specific tools and deliverables, right? So it's a concrete system, and I'm going to show you all the tools that are in there. We're going to go into all the different aspects of them. And in order to illustrate how this works, we're going to use a recent client of ours and walk you through how they did it. So you can see how you apply it. What is important about this is, and you'll see it right in the first block, this is a bespoke system. And what I mean by bespoke is it is tailored to your specific supply chain. We all know every supply chain is different, even though we all have, purchasing and logistics and, customs, whatever we have to deal with. But the supply chain itself is different in your company, in your country, for your product line. Sometimes for the product has a different supply chain. So you're going to have to tailor this to exactly, and you need to tailor this to exactly what you need in your company for your challenge, whether that's a product-based challenge, or product line-based challenge, or a challenge for, just the whole operation. I know that you guys as supply chain leaders are busy. I've been there. So we're going to pack this hour for you with a lot of information. We're going to break in the middle for questions, as I said. And the reason we break it into 2 here is, even though there's 3 steps, the first half is really this bespoke roadmap system, right? The second half is execution. And although, yes, you need a good, solid roadmap to know where you're going and how you're going to get there, most plans actually fail in execution. So execution itself should not be underestimated. Don't think just because you have a good roadmap system now you're done, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time on how to make sure execution really is going to be robust and you can trust that it's going to get done, even when you yourself might have a very small team, okay? So before we get into all of that, I do want to take a step back for a second and talk about why a system like this is necessary and why I think it's important to share what's happening in big enterprise as a tool to you. Okay, first of all, as I mentioned, the methodology is really designed for small and medium-sized businesses and startups. We're taking the practices of big enterprise and distilling those down into the key essentials that can work for you. It is not industry specific. You may be highly regulated like chemicals or pharma. You might have a simple consumer commerce model or a simple consumer good with no electronics or no moving parts. The methodology is the same regardless of the complexity and the sophistication really of your supply chain. but the 8 steps are going to be appropriate for everybody, and you can see how those can work for you. A quick introduction on my part. I'm Michelle. I'm an electrical engineer. I have a long career leading manufacturing and supply chain. And by supply chain, I'm talking really about end to end. So from procurement, production planning, distribution, logistics, the whole thing. I worked for both large and small companies, and I really saw the difference between the two. Okay, and that's really where the experience comes from, that I can bring this value to you. I've seen it on both sides. My company, Suplino, is dedicated to physical product operations. We are a network of experts who've worked at some of the most prestigious manufacturing and supply chain companies out there. You can see some of the list here is just a small sample of where the experts have worked. All these experts are vetted and they know absolutely the best way to deliver fast value from their experience at many of these companies. And some of that is what we're going to share with you today. Okay, as supply chain leaders at SMBs, you guys have a lot to handle, right? You have the typical challenges of quality, cost, cash flow, supplier manufacturing operation, supplier relationships, right? The normal challenges of supply chain. And in addition to that, small and medium-sized businesses often have the challenges around the team, where the team, you might have a great team, but often they may have come up from the floor or from entry-level positions, and they don't have a wide range of strategic skills, project management skills, analysis skills. They're also often totally consumed in firefighting. And so you just don't have extra bandwidth to do what are seen as often extra projects or strategic projects. They're often seen as less important than, and they get sidelined for the firefighting, right? However, we also all know that firefighting is not going to get you breakthrough performance, right? And firefighting is not also going to lift your team from tactical to strategic skill building or project management skill building. So how do you break out of that loop with all those challenges and with all those constraints and still 2 to 10x your performance in operations and supply chain? So, well, what we see most companies doing and struggling with in that situation, before we get into like how to fix it, let's talk about what the situation normally looks like. What do we see when we talk to operational leaders at SMBs? Typically, what's missing and how are they struggling with the situation? First, there's a lack of focus and investment because people are also usually or already sidelined and focused on firefighting. Focus is often on tasks versus process. Working the wrong leverage points, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about, well, what are the right leverage points, right? There's a resistance to outside help. Often, even though you're a small team and struggling, and you know you don't have those resources, often there's resistance to going outside, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And there's no operational strategy system. There's no step-by-step system that you're using that you can refresh each time and go through. Instead, what we often see is just a disjointed list of activities, a wish list of projects, of which many times you're only getting to like the first couple, and no real system. So that's what really we're going to educate you on today and share with you what that system should look like. Okay. So what's the secret? What at a high level, what are we talking about today? What's the secret? If that's the struggle, what's the answer, right? And how do big companies with large complex operations do it, right? What they do is they don't run tactics, they build capabilities. And that's really the shift in moving from action and tactical focus to a more strategic focus, right? Now, of course, that's easy to say. And I remember when I was managing supply chain, my executive VP of operations said to us as a team, you need to get more strategic. And we did not know what that meant. It sounded good to get more strategic, but what does that mean in terms of actions? What concrete action can I take tomorrow that is more strategic than today, right? So let's get into that. And let me show you the 3 elements and those 8 steps that really deliver a strategic approach for your unique supply chain in your unique team and company. Okay, so first let's go into, I told you before, I'm going to show you the system using a client of ours and how they used it. So just so that you know who that client was and what their situation was, this is who they were or are. They're a venture capital funded electronics startup, quite big in the startup, in the range of startups. So already past 10 million, on their way up. And when they started this process, they were in a crisis situation where the supply chain was constraining their growth. Okay. And we all know about COVID and 2019 supply chain issues. This was not COVID or those issues related to those issues. This was really a problem with the supplier, the contract manufacturer they had, the product that they had designed, and the relationship that they had between the company and the contract manufacturer and everything that was around that relationship. Um, so what happened? They started with high back orders. They had a very tactical operations team and a big fight. And the outcome, as you can see, in a relatively short time was quite dramatic, right? Big drop in customer back orders and they were able to ship. The ordering processing time, which they did not particularly look at to begin with, and it was in the background how they processed orders. But this company had configurable products. If you've ever worked with those, you know how complex they are. When a customer order comes in, you can't just send them a standard product, right? You have to do some changes and additions to each one. On-time fulfillment came up over 80% very quickly and freed capacity from their engineering team, which some of these things were unexpected benefits that they didn't see coming when they first came and said, we need help and we need to get our supply chain fixed, right? On their side, what investment did they make? Because this doesn't come for free. You have to do the work as a company. What did that take? Well, it took first a mindset shift, right, into a more strategic mindset. They did bring in external help, and I'll show you how they did that and what they did. They also, with all that help, restructured their internal team and implemented some training for their own supply chain and operations team. So that was their investment based on that result. A very good investment of their time, I think, right? In their money, they got results that were way beyond what they could have imagined. So, all right, how did they actually do it though? And that's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, first block of the system is a bespoke roadmap system. There are 4 steps in a bespoke roadmap, right? So at the end of this roadmap system, you're going to have a customized path for you getting to where you are today to where you want to be. And there's 4 steps to that. The first is a maturity model. Second, to-be visualization. Third, strategic roadmap. And fourth, you then make this into a system that is ongoing and builds up and goes up in capabilities from there. Okay. So they did all 4 of these steps, and we're going to get into each one of them so you can see what each of them are. And although this looks complex, right? And this client also, I told you they brought in expert help. This is where they did it. They did it in between step 2 and step 3 here. Although this looks complex and can be complex, right? And if you're a big enterprise, Fortune 500, just these 4 steps can take, a long time. But for this startup, this exercise of 4 steps took around 10 days. So it doesn't have to be a super involved analysis. It just depends on the scope that you're going to run it at and what you already have in place that you can take advantage of. Okay, first step, maturity model map. What is it? If you've never seen a maturity model before, it's a stratification of capability levels from lowest to highest, right? And it's lowest in the maturity map is always going to be the most reactive kind of organization. And you're going to move up to a more systematic, controlled organization that takes initiative and does things proactively instead of reactively, right? There are many of these models. You can see there's a step 1 here. There's a graph one. There's a blocks. There's in many different large consulting firms will come in with their own maturity models. You can find these online relatively easily. You can also borrow from other organizations and consultants. But one thing to notice here is that they also, not only do they come in different formats, right, is they come in different scopes. So you can do a maturity model on your entire company. You can do a maturity model on your supply chain. You can do a maturity model on your S&OP process. It just depends on what you're looking at in terms of scope, okay? Regardless of the one you choose and the scope you choose, what is important here in this step is you're looking for an agreed and aligned starting point with your team and with your leadership on where are we today, okay? Your team is typically going to be very detailed focused. Your leadership is going to be flying up at the high levels. This is a nice tool that can give you an easy visualization to communicate to everybody, hey guys, this is, let's just face facts, here's where we are. It's not a good or a bad, right? I mean, you are where you are based on the amount of investment and the capability your company has. There's no good or bad judgment. It's just an agreed starting point so that you can look at, okay, where do we want to go from here? What makes sense to keep going, right? When our client did it, to give you an idea, they were focused here. I mean, this client was a startup. So, and if you guys have ever worked with startups, you know, they really often are going to be starting at the most reactive level. They weren't much past that, right? And you remember I told you that they came to us really wanting to fix just a crisis. And that was it. Their idea was, let's get this problematic supplier replaced. And once we get that problematic supplier replaced, that should fix all our problems and we'll be good to go. However, once they reflected on this maturity topic and we talked to them about the maturity level they're at and what capabilities they have, they realized how reflective their operations are, reactive their operations are, and their need to really move up that ladder. And they started talking about other contributing factors in their supply chain situation, like team turnover, like engineering change controls, like lack of systems, right? And this is exactly the value of this step. You move the focus away from your tactical actions, right? Let's replace the supplier, right? And you give a more holistic view, and it's the first step in shifting to a much more strategic mindset. And it gives you a much better scope on what do we need to fix and how do we need to fix it and what are some contributing factors to that. Okay, so a super valuable first starting point. Okay, next step, to-be visualization. This is an aligned identification of your future state. All right, again, format varies widely. You can do a shared statement, you can do bullets, you can do a document. What is important is not the format of the future vision. What's important is it's aligned, right? That with your team and with your leadership, and that you are clear on where you are going next. And it may be that you're going to go up that maturity curve X amount in certain areas of your company. It may be that you've decided to focus on one product line or one region of the world that you're working in or one team. Whatever it is, you need to be crystal clear in this to-be visualization on where do you guys want to go next, right? And what's important to you? Is it the employee experience or the customer experience? Is it the tech that's important? Is it something else, right? Aligned is the most important part. Okay, now for this customer, this client here, 2023 client, you'll see they were crystal clear on where they wanted to go next. Even though they said initially, yeah, we want to replace the supplier, the outcome of that was we want to be the premium fast answer for customers. We want stock available. We want deep relationships. We want to use tech wherever possible. They were clear on their next step. And okay, that's very nice to have that clear direction from the leadership team. And it comes right down to the team and it's crystal clear. You do not always have the luxury of a leadership team telling you this clear next step. Often leadership teams will say to you, you're the supply chain head. You tell me where we're going with supply chain, right? When you don't have that clarity, you need to create it. And you do that with your team and you do that with alignment exercises. You can see kind of sticky note exercises. You can bring in external advisory to help you bring everybody together and get an aligned team with your aligned vision with your team and your stakeholders. But I'm really emphasizing the aligned part here. What you don't want to do is you as a leader come up with your to-be visualization, this is where we're going, and then just announce it to everybody. You really want the buy-in and the input from your team so that when you're going forward, that team is really with you versus you coming up with something and just trying to push it down. Okay. All right, at this point in the process, at any point in the process, you can leverage external consultants. For our client, this is where they brought in the external consultants, okay? And it's for all these little bubble reasons. They realized that their internal team did not have either the desire to work on this, the skill to work on it, or the bandwidth. And they wanted somebody to come in and really lead this for them, okay? And I'm showing here in the blue, under 2023 client, what they wanted that expert to do. So you can see they asked for short-term things, address the current struggles, while also they realized because we had done the to-be visualization and we'd done the capability, the maturity map, they realized they actually needed more than that. So they asked to actually do some other key things for the future as well, right? We brought in 3 skilled experts, all with China and electronics experience, which is specifically what they needed in this case. All those experts had different approaches to how to do this. They then chose the roadmap that made sense for them. Okay, so that was how they then created that next roadmap. And for them, in theory, yeah, they could do this internally, but they had been struggling and failing with it. And they needed faster results. And bringing in outside help will always accelerate the results on something like this. Okay. So now you have your current state, you have your maturity map, you have your future vision, and you can build that roadmap, your clear path to success. And this is what the experts did for our client, but what you want out of this step is you want a specific path to success before jumping into activity, right? I mentioned in the beginning, leveraging the wrong work. And that happens when activity starts happening without any roadmap. Everybody gets all excited. They already know what the problem is. Like with our client, fixing, replacing the supplier was their fix. And they were just running down that road. And it was not giving them any good results, right? So you want to really take a step back from all this and start a strategic roadmap. What are the elements of a strategic roadmap? First, a gap analysis. What is missing between current and future state? What are the urgent or high priority areas of what is missing? And typically, what makes priority is it's going to touch the customer or it's going to touch the employees in your team, right? If it's burning out all your team, there's no use adding 16 projects because you're not going to, right? You need a project now that figures out how to unburn out your team and get your team to be more strategic, for example, right? Okay, gap analysis. Next step, root causes. You use a fishbone diagram I've shown over to the left. There are other tools to do root causes. If you work with Six Sigma, you'll know a lot of them, right? Why do you have the gap you have? And then after that, the roadmap. Don't jump right into action. Really get the roadmap set up. Note the Michael Porter statement there. It's a really important statement that he made around strategy. Strategy and a roadmap, it's not a wish list. It's not every single project that you guys want to do for the next 3 years. You really have to focus down and choose the ones that make sense, that you are going to have bandwidth to do, that are going to give you the best bang for the buck, right? It's really essential. For our expert, what you can see there, or our customer, our client, you can see there in green, that is the top half of a project management sheet that they use to track the overall project. And you can see there's 3 steps that the expert came in and built their roadmap. And under each of those 3 steps were a number of deliverables and sub-steps. Okay, so that came in from external, but for you guys, if you're going to do it internally, you have to do that same thing yourselves with your own team. Okay, last step in this block, making this into a system. And this is really important, right? I'm going to say everything's really important here, but it is, or I wouldn't have included it, right? the systematize, what this does for you is it locks in your progress and makes sure that you're not backsliding when you do projects. And if you've been around for a while, you may have been victimized by that in your team, where somebody will tell you, oh, we tried that project 2 years ago and we did it and now it's right back to where it was before. That's backsliding, and it happens a lot when you don't have a systematic process that can lock in those gains, right? You may know the PDCA cycle from Lean, Plan, Do, Check, Act. That is the cycle you absolutely want to continue. Plan it, do it, check how it's working, adjust it, and keep going, right? It's not a line, it's really a circle. How do you do that? Practically speaking, get a review on the calendar, and make sure people are clear on responsibilities for the review, that you're constantly reviewing the gains that you've made and those changes that you've put into your process. So I've shown a RACI tool here, if you're familiar with that. RACI tools really force clarity of responsibility and can be very helpful for that. So what's an example of backsliding or a struggle around backsliding? Like, so for example, who's responsible for documenting new processes? Who's responsible for training and making sure that somebody new coming in sees the new process? Or if the process changes, it gets updated. So it's really a living document and not a document in a process that you designed 5 years ago and no one looks at anymore, right? That's the kind of stuff that you want to make sure is locked into your process. In our case with the client, they worked with an external expert, and that's going to be slightly different, right? You know that external expert is now leaving. They're doing a project and then they're gone. So how do you lock in the gains from something like that, right? In this case, you do it, and we had the expert do it before they left. They put in the process documentation, they put in the training documents, they did a knowledge transfer to the team that they were leaving behind, and they upskilled the designated team member that was going to own this after the expert left. So that's really an important part of, if you're going to bring in external people to do work, don't let them just design a process and everybody's excited when it goes in and then they take off, right? Really build it into something systematic that you keep in the company, that the company learns, not just the expert. So it's a relatively small investment in your time. You're not going to spend most of your time here, but it's a small effort in monitoring and adjusting that really avoids expensive and time consuming corrections later. Okay, so after the 4 steps and this first element, the client has a bespoke roadmap system. Why is this important? No one's actually done anything yet, right? At this client, this is just all planning, right? Why is this so valuable and so crucial? So let's look at what the impact was for this client. First of all, instant relief from their investors, right? If you're a startup and you work in the VC world, VCs are high pressure when it comes to companies not performing, especially not performing because their supply chain is behind. So the investors were instantly, okay, you have a plan. This looks like a robust plan. It looks like a good plan. It's going to get you there. Great. I think more importantly, honestly, is the reaction from the team. The team, as you can imagine, in crisis is burnt out. Everybody's been trying everything. Nothing's working. They're feeling like no one listens to them. No one's helping them. And this plan now, they're part of the plan. They are being listened to. They see the light at the end of the tunnel and they see how it can work. And it's not just, in this case, the supply chain team. It's also the stakeholder teams around it that are being impacted by all these problems, engineering, finance, et cetera. Finally, it also is a high impact on the leadership credibility of that CEO, of that startup CEO, right? And for you, if you are not part of a startup and you're a supply chain head, you might say, well, my leadership credibility, my CEO isn't important. But in your case, it's your credibility that's on the line as the head of supply chain. How strategic are you? Do you have what it takes to lead that company and that supply chain into the future? Having a robust roadmap system like this, it is amazing what it will do to your own credibility and your own strategic skills that you can really highlight and illustrate what you are doing and how you bring value to the company supply chain. So, okay, we're going to pause now for questions. That's the first half of the system. But let me give you my contact info. If you do need to run, you can use this link. You see this QR code, or you can see down below the Calendly link there. I keep my calendar open for calls with people. And let's talk. I'm happy to even just, there's no commitment to the talk, but I would really like to hear how you think you can use this system at your company or how you could adjust it. And I'm happy to give you the benefit of my experience and my leadership in terms of what I think you could do to make your own strategic skills stronger and really illustrate them using the system and adapt it for you and your team.
And Michelle, let me just launch the follow-up poll so that if people want to follow up with you, they can. Okay.
Sure. Go ahead and do that, Eugene.
So I've launched that, and in the meantime, we do have a question for you, Michelle.
Yep.
What is the duration of the early steps? This seems to be a big time commitment.
Yeah, like I said, the early steps, they really vary. When I look at the company that we are using, for example, here, like I said, that whole thing that I just went through was a 10-day process. And the 10 days includes finding the experts, outside experts, which took like 4 days. So really it was a 6-day process. So in a week, you can do a good job of this process if you have the skill, right? And you have the right people involved in it. And that is the scope of a startup, $10 million revenue size, a small team. If you are in a much larger team, let's say you're running, it's a medium-sized business, maybe you are at the 50 or 100 million range, then each of those steps, you're going to have to decide, are you going to do this for your whole supply chain, or are you going to do this for a product line or a section? And how deep do you want to go in each of those steps is up to you. So there really is no minimum time or maximum time. Certainly you as a supply chain leader can sit and play around with the steps and do your own versions of them and see, what it gives you. But the value is going to be really doing the work and doing it with the team and getting the buy-in from your leadership that, yep, what you've done makes sense to them. And that's hard for me to say without knowing more about the supply chain and the team and the situation you're in.
Okay, and then a follow-up question. When you're trying to get buy-in, what are some concrete ideas for senior management buy-in?
So buy-in, anything specific around the buy-in for the process at all, or?
Just for senior management.
So senior management will naturally want you to be strategic and expect this kind of work is being done naturally from you, in my experience. And they may already be frustrated that they're not seeing something at this level. So I think they will be very receptive to the work, as long as, and this is the key thing, it's not getting in the way of what they see as urgent daily business. And that's always the trade-off, right? Is if you have customer problems and you're trying to deliver this in the midst of struggling with customer problems, you've got to do it in a way that you're not telling leadership, I'm putting customer problems on the back burner so that I can kind of play around with being strategic. You need to be able to show that, no, it is the strategic work that's going to fix the customer problems. This is how we're fixing the customer problems. And so I think tuning it and making sure that upfront, when you do the work, you can get sales, or you can get customer service, or you can get whoever your stakeholders are from the customer side into the process, and at least educate them that, listen, I'm going to do this exercise. This is to fix our problems once and for all. I know we keep struggling with these things over and over, and we keep having problems. I really want to get the root of this. I want to get a completely different level of performance out of this supply chain. I want to show you, what I'm doing to do that. And in that case, I think you don't have a problem getting senior leadership buy-in for the exercises.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then in a similar vein, I do have a question here. So when you have a CEO who is against processes, if they see it as slowing down the pace,
Yeah.
how do you address um, executing this system if you have that type of CEO?
Yeah, if you have that type of CEO, then what you have to do is make it clear that your absolute priority and the work you are doing is on the tactical emergency stuff. And this is being done as a parallel thing that is not distracting resources. Okay. And some of that is only possible sometimes bringing in external help. And that is what we're going to talk about, some of what we're going to talk about in the execution system. Because that is the reality of the challenge of small and medium-sized businesses. They don't have the teams and they don't have the budgets that big enterprise has for something like this, right? You don't have an extra 3 people that can do projects on the side while your main, 6 people are working on the day-to-day. You might have a team of 3 and that's all you've got, and they're drowning as it is. So in that case, the advantages, and we're going to talk about that on how to use external people to come in and add to the team without distracting what's happening. Of course, that challenge is then how do you get the CEO to pay for it, right? Because that's not free. And you do that by showing them the business case and the benefits they can get out of this work and the payback that this work will give, getting everybody out of these crises over and over again. So again, it's really a more strategic approach. It's not, I'm going to bring somebody in or I'm going to get some help and we're going to solve this one thing. This is, we're going to come really up and we're not going to have to deal with these problems again after we put this in place. So important that you're able to sell it that way on the benefits and that you see that this can deliver that level of benefits.
I think that's it for questions for right now.
Okay.
We'll address other questions at the end of the execution system discussion.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's get into execution. Okay, so yeah, as I said before, all well and good to talk about having a strategy, but the statistics, if you've ever looked on it, researched it on Harvard Business Review and other publications on the amount of strategies that never get implemented is staggering, right? So it's actually more important that you have an execution system for your strategy than you have a strategy without an execution system. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And reliable, this is broken into 2 pieces. Reliable execution is how to do the execution, and then talent leverage is the who's going to do this work, which is what we're just talking about in the Q&A. All right, number 1 reason, why do projects fail? All right, so this is under execution. Why do projects fail? And I have seen this myself personally in leadership many, many times, way too many. And that is misaligned expectations between who is leading the project or sponsoring the project and the team doing the work. Like just like this, right? And it is extremely costly to have that situation from a couple of different reasons. One, costly from a resource perspective, right? You've just blown resources on a project that you're not satisfied with the results of. You can't get that time back. But I think more importantly, you've blown the team, right? The team works hard. They get what they think is a good result. They're proud of it. And leadership comes in and says, nah, I thought you were going to do this over here, or I expected this and I don't see that. And this is extremely painful for a team. It will sap their enthusiasm for any future projects. And it just, if you've ever had a team that doesn't want to work on projects, this has probably happened to them. This is probably part of the reason they're so unwilling to work on projects. They just don't see that the project is worth their time. Yet you need projects, obviously, right, to put in the work. So the good news about this kind of dangerous little landmine is it is relatively easy to avoid. All right, it's painful for when it happens, and it happens way too often, but you can avoid it, and you can avoid it by applying clarity before the project starts. Okay, and You do that two ways. First way, improvement work in general should be structured in projects and initiatives, all right? If you are avoiding calling something a project, um, you are losing all the clarity that comes from setting expectations. And that's why things fail, right? So you got to get back to setting up a project plan with clarity as part of it, right? And use simple tools to clearly document the scope and expectations for success. And here I'm showing at the top here, this kind of blue, teal, and white form, right, is a one-page project summary. You don't need multi-page project documents. I've seen teams use project kickoff sheets that were like 40 pages long, way in excess of what you need, too confusing, very difficult to clearly get a sense of what is the team doing. Just use a one-pager, a simple one-pager. It's an absolute game changer to force clarity on the project that everyone can see. The team can see it, the sponsor can see it, the executive can see it. Everybody says, yes, that's what we want, okay? Our client did that with the external expert, all right? You remember they brought in an external expert. Even with an external consultant, you want that clarity. You do not want that consultant, and you're spending money on this. You don't want them leaving and you're like, did he really do what we thought he should do? And then you talk to the consultant says, I did everything they told me that they needed, right? That to me is a failure in the project. So in this case, again, you can see that cutout that we have of the project plan we used with this particular consultant. And what you can see up above is the scope of the project is clearly stated, and we continue to repeat that statement every project update. So everybody's clear what's in scope for the project, and then you see to the right what's out of scope for the project. Very important that that's clearly delineated, even with, we're talking a relatively senior person working on this project. Again, a small investment in structure and communications will provide really a huge payoff in results for the work that you're going to do in execution. Okay, risk management is the second part of reliable execution. As a leader, you're clear on the project definition, you got the team, you can just let them rock and roll and do their thing, right? And here is a big watch out for leaders, and that is sponsorship, what we call sponsorship. Sponsorship is you are not leading the project. Maybe your team is going to be the project lead. You have somebody from your team being the project lead, but you're going to sponsor the work. You're the guy or the gal that their team is going to come to an update. You're overseeing it. You're paying for it in terms of these are your people, or this is your expense budget that you're using. Your role as sponsor in execution success is super important. It is critical that you be what we call an active sponsor. And I'm showing in blue and white up there the difference between what's an active sponsor and what's a passive sponsor. An active sponsor is one that's engaged, that's monitoring the process and the progress that the team is making, and is ready and willing to help jump in and help the team without seeing that as a failure on the part of a team, right? Why is that so important? We are told as leaders all the time, don't micromanage, empower people, give them their stuff, let them run, right? So why here am I telling you, no, be active in looking at the project. And the reason is risk, right? Even excellent teams with clear deliverables, they will derail, okay? They're gonna run into obstacles they can't get over. They don't have the relationships you have with other senior leaders. They don't have the insight you have as a senior person in your leadership's a senior insight. They just don't have that access. And if you are not involved in paying attention, you can't help them with those obstacles, right? And often they will be intimidated to call you because they'll say, well, let's not bother him, or he's busy, or he'll think we're not doing it right if we don't say anything. That is what's going to kill the project. And that's what's really going to cost you overruns and delays and problems because you can't jump in and see it, right? For our client with, again, external person running the project, even then, bi-weekly updates where we specified each time the consultant had to give, what is he working on? What are the next steps? What are the risks that he's dealing with and that may need help on? incredibly important. And the leaders of the client saw that every 2 weeks, and we made sure that that was clear and they could jump in. And in fact, it did happen a couple times that they needed to jump in and help. And you can see it in the form that I'm sharing here. You see the more full projects update form. And you can see there's a section called needs. And that's pretty much, that's where the expert is saying, hey, there's some risks here that I need help for you to deal with, right? And you can see it's not, that's an actual one, it's not blank. So don't view problems and risks from teams as they always have to be zero and blank to be good. Risks are realities of a project. You want to know what they are and be involved in helping mitigate and help clear those risks for the team. Okay, so what's the value of this? Reliable execution, just this section of making sure your execution is scoped correctly, is set up for success, essentially, right? What it means is there's no delays in the project and there's no derailing of the project. You can trust, right? That's why it's reliable execution. You can trust that when you hit go, yes, there's some work involved, but your team is going to be able to deliver what they said they can deliver. And it's really exciting because now you're going to start seeing the results that you expected, and you're going to be able to say to your leadership team, see, I told you we do this project and we deliver it. And I told you we do that project and we deliver it. And you're going to start really delivering instead of this constant struggle to, find, to deliver and backslide and deliver and backslide, which is the kind of firefighting loop. All right, final section to talk about. And in many ways for constrained small and medium-sized businesses, this is the key question is, who's going to do the work? This all sounds great and I can see the value of it and I could maybe even sell my leadership team on it, but I don't have bandwidth for this, right? And so let's talk about what's the approach, and how do you leverage talent that you can get, okay? And I will tell you right now, the big guys, the Fortune 500s, even non-Fortune 500s, big enterprise, what are they all doing? They're all bringing in externals. And it's not because they have money to burn, and it's not because they don't have the skills in-house necessarily. They do it for a little bit of a different reason. They're not as constrained. What they do is they use externals really to implement change and make major changes, because internally in bigger companies, the ability to make changes when you have these huge teams, lots of people involved, the politics involved, the momentum you need to get change through a large organization, bringing in externals kind of cuts through that change much, much more easily. Now, having said that, okay, we're not Fortune 500. We don't have this kind of budget. So how do we do it? And first of all, I want to talk about, you want to find the right kind of external person for you. We in small and medium-sized businesses, we're not going to go to McKinsey. We're not going to BCG like Fortune 500s do, right? We really want to find an external person that comes in that is budget friendly, that knows our industry, that knows our product and any regulations around it, and that can be effective very, very quickly, right? Harvard Business School, this is this ladder I'm showing you, this hierarchy of consulting purposes. Before you start jumping into like, who do I need and what kind of person do I need? You can see they have a nice view to what is the value expertise can bring you. So what level kind of person, and what do you want to do with the person even that you bring in? Now, as we look at what our client did, right? The very bottom of what you bring in a consultant for is they can bring in and advise. So they provide information, a list of best practices, a list of potential ERP systems that you could use, maybe some startup companies that are doing something interesting that you could implement their technology, right? But the value you'll see is at the bottom of the ladder, right, for that. As you go up, the value of driving change and using a consultant adds a lot of value as you go up this. So What our client did is not only did they provide a list of like, this is what you need to do, but then they did the implementation, they built the systems, they facilitated the skill learning of your team. And that's kind of what you need to think about when you think about, well, maybe I can bring in, and how should I use someone externally? Okay. Very interesting to see the change in mindset from companies thinking, well, do I need a consultant and how do I utilize them? Maybe they can solve this one problem, versus let me bring them in as part of my strategy as a leader to help upskill my team and then drive change. And that's how you want to be thinking of it when you do think of using external talent. Okay. Okay, so that, again, that's great, but you don't, maybe you don't have this, the budget that you think you need for a consultant. Consultants are notoriously expensive. And here is where I want to open your eyes up to what has been happening in the industry in the last 5 years, okay? The advent of remote work and the ability to access communication of data and systems via a laptop, you guys know, it's unbelievable. Experienced senior people as well as junior people are working multiple jobs in multiple locations, right? And because the number of expert freelancers has exploded, the costs have become much more reasonable than they used to be. Many experts are thrilled to share their vast experience with you, and you can get impressive talent that you never could have afforded to hire full time as a freelance consultant. Where do you find them, right? Because you, again, you want somebody for your industry, your product, that has the experience you need on whatever specific problems you guys are having that you're coming up with. In the old days, finding them was trade shows and your network. Trade shows are not as hot as they used to be. They're coming back, but they're still not as the attendance isn't up to where they used to be. And younger leaders, especially, they don't have the desire for trade shows, and they don't have the networks of the old guard. They don't really have these wide networks. You can look online. There are, LinkedIn searches you can do. You can look at, there are also consulting websites that are quite broad, that offer consultants of all kinds. But, of course, I'm going to tell you, come to us. Suplino, we only offer manufacturing and supply chain experts. This is only what we do. But wherever you do it, okay, wherever you find these guys, whether it's your network or from a trade show or us or somewhere else, do not go. My advice to you is do not go with the first guy that you talk with, okay? Even if they sound like a perfect fit and they sound great. What this person is going to deliver to you is so important. You need to view it like you do hiring, right? Multiple candidates, see what they can offer and see what their different approaches are, and be open to that ladder of possible contributions they can make and push them up the ladder, right? So that they're really adding value to what you need and your team needs that can help you. And as we already referenced, that's exactly what our client did. And they got a great match out of the 3 candidates we had, you can see above. They chose one of those and got great performance out of it. And certainly their investment in terms of what they spent on it versus the results they got back was paid back many times over. So I want to emphasize, as at the end of this targeted talent leverage thing, it is not, yeah, hire a consultant. That's the answer. It's really, and especially you can see it in our client, what they did, they were thoughtful about who they needed, how they were going to utilize them, the type of work they did, and what they had that person do. And as a result of that, that's where they got the tremendous value. They never could have delivered this internally. They would have been still struggling with it today. And so they did it while keeping the business humming and while keeping customers happy. So, overall, here is the trifecta, right? That I want you guys to be able to say in your organizations. Yes, I have a confident roadmap. I know it is executable, and we can do it with our daily business, right? And that's what we're all trying to deliver, regardless of the different actions and priorities and you all may have within that plan. Our client started with tactical tribal knowledge, a frustrated team, drowning, and really ended up in a completely different place. It wasn't just that their supplier problem was solved, right? It's really building the capability of the team and building the capability of that company. Good for the company, good for the employees, and good for that leader. Okay, and with that, how can we at Soplino help you? So that you know what we do, we guide you through this entire process, right? So we are a network of experts, but we understand each of these different steps, and we run these steps with you with our own deep understanding of supply chain and manufacturing. We find you the right expert, and we ensure results. We have over 120 experts, actually, I think it's more like 150 now, that know how to do this across industries, across geographies, across regulatory and across the different functions of manufacturing, engineering, and supply chain. They love doing this work and using their experience to quickly deliver value for you. You guys can do this, right? Let's talk about how it would work for your unique manufacturing operations and supply chain. As I said, I keep my schedule open, and I love talking. You can tell I love talking operations and supply chain, and happy to share any advice I can give you or any support you need in looking to utilize this methodology in your own company. I'll open up any other questions, Eugene, and I think you also have a small feedback poll, right?
Yes, I've launched the feedback poll.
Okay.
And any other questions in the audience? I do have one. In terms of participation from the different agents and team members,
Mm.
how do you manage resistance?
From team, yeah. So as I said, okay, I'm assuming this means within your own team.
Yes.
Resistance, yeah. And we talked about this on an earlier webinar as well, is some team members, even though you as the boss would love to get them on a project, are very resistant to working on projects. And I usually see that in two flavors. One flavor is they're actually quite good at projects, but they've been burned so many times before, and they feel like projects are a waste of time. And they'll tell you that projects are a waste of time. And in that case, you have to kind of bring back some credibility to get them back on board, those people. Again, I'm going to advocate bringing in external people and getting them on a project with an external person running the project can help, because then they don't have to run the entire thing themselves, right? And they can see. But regardless of whether it's external or internal, you're going to need to show them that a project is not a waste of time for you to get them back on board. The other kind of flavor I see are people that just hate projects. And I personally am not one of them. I love projects, but I have learned over the years that there are people that really hate them, and they really just want to be on their computer, answering emails, doing their production planning, doing their engineering. They are not interested in projects. And in my experience, it's not worth your time to try to drag them on kicking and screaming. And, those people, let them do their thing and let them be the adjunct expert or subject matter expert, SME, on a project for a certain thing, but don't drag them on kicking and screaming. I have not been successful with that. If you guys have, maybe you have some advice for me and you can tell me how to do that. But that's been my experience, is focus on the people that are more burnt out of projects. And for that, run some projects that are small wins first so that they can get back their confidence and their trust in working on projects first.
And another question is, if someone is interested in joining your network of consultants, what would the process be?
Yes. Okay. Reach out to me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on email, michelle@soplino.com. We have a vetting process. I'll send you a link to sign up for our network, and you can just go through. We have a short vetting process to see your skills and evaluate the level of seniority and what you're capable of and where you'd fit. And happy to do that. We're always looking for great freelance talent, regardless of what industry or discipline you're coming from, as long as it's manufacturing and supply chain. That's really our focus. Yeah.
And that's it for the questions, Michelle. I think we can close the call today.
Okay, all right. Well, it was fun sharing this with you guys. I hope to hear from you and hear about your specific situations, and have a great day.